What's going on, guys? We're back for more all-new Venom, to where now with the mystery being gone as far as us wondering who's wearing the Venom symbiote, now that we know that it's been MJ this whole time, we've got to talk about how this all even happened. So with that said, if you're enjoying these videos, be sure to drop a like, subscribe if you're new to the channel, and don't forget to hit that bell up top to get all notifications. Alright, so for all new Venom issue 6, this picks up on the crazy reveal we got last month when we found out that all new Venom was Mary Jane Watson. So coming back as you would expect, we jump right into the explanation, with MJ telling Robbie and Paul how this happened because much like us, they have plenty of questions. So both MJ and Venom go back and forth telling the story, starting from the Venom War Spider-Man tie-in, when MJ as Jackpot was fighting the Arachnneote and losing badly. And she mentions how at the time all she could think about was how this was Venom's fault. And I mean, she's not wrong, but at the same time it's like, what we doing? But either way, MJ says that she felt this way because Venom glooped his gloop all over her jackpot device. But to be fair, this was in response to MJ not wanting her device to be so random or limited. So Venom defends himself by telling her, "You ordered Spider-Man and me to make it work better, so we did. And instead of a random useless power from a random useless machine, you suddenly had something that worked, just like you asked for." So Venom's just like, yeah, and you're welcome, by the way. So this is where Paul chimes in like, excuse me, sorry. I know you're both eager to tell me how random and useless my tech is, but I've got a question. And right there it's kind of like, oh yeah, Paul, you want to know what else is random and useless? Because it ain't just your tech. But no, the question that Paul ends up asking here is why MJ and Venom are sitting the way that they are, referring to Venom's arm being around MJ. So MJ tells him here we have to maintain contact, that's all. Usually I'm wearing the symbiote or he's in my bloodstream. It's not like we're friends. And Venom's like, we're not friends, Paul, but we do have to stay together. Or, and that's when MJ tells him, or we'll die. But before they go deeper into the details, as far as why that's their current situation, Robbie's just like, let's finish this Arachnneote story first. Because he tells her eyewitnesses saw both Jackpot and Spider-Man blow up the Arachnneote from the inside. Which right there is quite literally what happened during the conclusion of Venom War Spider-Man, back when Peter gave the symbiote to both Eddie and Dylan after seeing the crazy future that this could lead to, with MJ going inside the Arachnneote and bonding to it, only to later pass it on to their daughter, in a timeline when Peter was the active King in Black. And this is why at the time when MJ fell inside of the Arachnneote, Peter left Eddie and the others at the arena, and he dove into the Arachnneote to save MJ. And with how this played out, it's just like how MJ describes it now, with Peter going in there and giving her emotional support, or moral support as she would describe, because they did the whole flashback thing, with Peter teaching her the whole thing about power and responsibility, and MJ telling Peter how having power doesn't mean that you have to do it alone. So yeah, basically they came together and used the power of the friend zone to destroy the thing. But nonetheless, Peter risked his life to save hers. And Venom's just like, it's what he does, he's pretty amazing. And I gotta admit, I always love to see Venom express his love for Peter, because that's something that's always been there. Even in the early days when it seemed like Venom hated Peter, because that was just Venom's reaction to the initial rejection. But going back to the Arachnneote story, MJ goes on to tell them with Peter's help, two minds were harder to eat than one, and working together they were able to get the jackpot device under control, which is how they defeated the Arachnneote, with a great huge bang. But for Paul, he's like, that's what the world saw. But from what he saw in the readings from the device, he thought MJ was dying, which is why he was so relieved when she came back home. And MJ remembers that, but she also remembers feeling terrible and selfish and like such a bad person because she didn't feel the same way Paul did. And on top of that, she didn't want Paul to feel that way again. So for a little while, there was this combination of MJ buzzing from fighting for her life and making it out, while also feeling this need to protect Paul from feeling so helpless. And this is why when the jackpot device started acting up again, MJ didn't tell him. And what she ended up finding out later on was as a result of Venom leaving a piece of himself in her jackpot device in order to make it more reliable with less restrictions, this caused it to go on the fritz, where at first it started giving MJ random roles like Skull Cherry Venom, which in that case turned her into this weird jelly form that looks a lot like Glob Herman, but with it happening in mid-flight, she just dropped to the ground and splashed on the concrete. And at the time, she didn't know if this was something that Paul was doing or what was going on. And right after that, the next role she got was 7 Venom Horseshoe, which then turned her into a Kree super soldier. Similar to, though not exactly like Tel-Kar from Venom First Host, but when this happened and MJ tried to remove the jackpot device, it wouldn't come off like it was bonded to her. And as MJ's describing this, she's like, it was bonded to me and it wouldn't let go. And she looks at Venom and she says, just like a symbiote. Feel free to jump in anytime, big guy. So Venom takes it from here, and he explains how with the glyph technology in the jackpot device being a combination of both science and magic, Venom used science and magic to link to it as well, but it was a deeper bond than they knew, which wouldn't have been a problem if Venom wasn't hit with a combination of the K chemical anti-symbiote poison plus a dose of time travel reverse Carnage goop, which is all referring to the conclusion of Venom War, because at the time after we saw Venom get away, he just crawled into the sewer to die, which is where MJ found him because the piece of the Venom symbiote that was still in the jackpot device, it was reaching out to Venom, much like a compass. And at this point, MJ's looking bad because she just rolled 2 skulls into Venom. So basically her skin has got a mind of its own, which needless to say had MJ in excruciating pain. And on the next roll when the order switched to Skull Venom Skull, which is basically the same items in a different order, this then caused her bones to go crazy. So MJ tells them here, and mainly Robbie because Paul knows this part. But she says here, through the agony, I knew I was running out of chances. That was always the big risk of the jackpot device, that I'd get the bad roll, 3 skulls in a row, which means instant death. And as soon as she says this, Robbie just looks at Paul and he's like, and you built this for her? And for Paul, this is why he had the limiter on the device, to keep it from rolling 3 skulls, which as we know suddenly became possible again when the Venom symbiote placed a piece of itself inside and removed the limiter, which was a working plan for what they needed at the time when Venom had it under control. But after everything Venom went through at the end of Venom War, he lost that control. And eventually MJ's luck ran out because her next roll was 3 skulls, which immediately caused her to be unmade on a molecular level. So with literally just seconds to respond, in this moment the only thing Venom was thinking was, what would Spider-Man do? And that's when he leaped out to bond with MJ. And Venom says in a moment like this, Spider-Man, he'd try. If there was the smallest chance of the slightest shred of the tiniest sliver of hope, he'd try. And if there was no hope at all, he'd try just the same. So I did the only thing I knew to do, my purest instinct as a symbiote. And I gotta tell you, with this going into this whole what would Spider-Man do thing, I can only imagine Sidorak looking down from above like, it's true, big dog. Spider-Man got me out here acting different. I'm responsible as now. Because once again, the Spider-Man influence, it's heavy out here. But Venom goes on to say here, I initiated a bond. I became the bond holding her together. The glue keeping her in one piece. Now I'm that for her. And she's that for me. We're not just bonded, we're fused. On the molecular level, we are Venom. And we are Mary Jane Watson. Or we're dead. So after this, MJ goes on to explain why she didn't tell Paul. Because at first she did want to sit him down and talk to him about what happened. And after Venom had heard so much about Paul during Venom War Spider-Man, Venom was curious about the guy. But then it's also here in the present day where Paul realizes why him and MJ haven't been intimate lately. And it's funny because one of you guys had mentioned in the comments of the last video, like, ew, if Venom's bonded to MJ and her and Paul are getting down, does that mean that Paul smashed Venom? Well, now we got our answer. Nothing happened. And I'm glad that's the case because hashtag no Paul was finna go crazy. And MJ admits that over time, this turned into a thing where she went from wanting to find the right time to tell Paul to just putting it off for another day and another day until eventually she was just so deep into the lie that she just decided to keep it a secret. And over time, that's when Venom was like, okay, I can keep a secret. He's not my boyfriend. But with keeping this secret, Venom also wanted something in return. And that's what led to the arrangements concerning Dylan. Because Venom didn't want Dylan locked up somewhere where he was being tortured again. So he asked MJ to call Flash Thompson to make the arrangements. And it wasn't hard to convince MJ because through the bond, she could feel how Venom felt about Dylan. So after that, MJ sweet talked Paul into letting Dylan stay with them while making it seem like it was Flash Thompson who set this whole thing up. And looking back, this just reminds Paul how he was played like a fool. So now with everything basically being explained, this just leaves one more question. With that question being, since Robbie Robertson came here with most of this figured out, now that he knows the rest of the story, is he gonna put it in the paper and basically destroy their lives? But when Paul asks Robbie what's his next move gonna be, Robbie basically tells him, like he said before, he's known MJ and Venom for years. And over that time, he's published a lot of stories about the Venom symbiote. He's seen Venom as a villain, a vigilante, an agent of the state, and even as a desperate fugitive. But Robbie says here, I don't believe I've ever seen Venom act like a traditional superhero. That's new. And the honest truth is that when I look at Venom now, live and in person, not 6 feet away from me, I don't feel afraid of him at all. Not one little bit. So should I splash your story on the front page, ruin all that good work, set scar on you for trying to do the right thing? That doesn't seem like it's in the public's interest, does it? And that's where Paul is like, but you're a journalist. You have to print this, don't you? And it's like, shut up, Paul. The man's trying to do you a solid. Because really, Robbie's being cool about the whole thing. Because he's like, sure, I'll keep it a secret, but I might write a best-selling book about it in 3 or 4 years. And really, aside from that, he's just like, as long as Venom doesn't slip back into any old habits, then their secret's safe. And MJ's cool with it, so she tells Robbie that he's more than welcome to stay for dinner. But at this point, Robbie's like, man, I almost been here for 2 issues. I gotta get back to work. But as he gets ready to leave, Dylan gets home. And as Dylan walks in, mind you, Robbie, he's on his way out. And Dylan, he still hasn't heard any of the recent Venom updates. So as he walks in, he's just like, yeah, school sucked. Thanks for asking. Then he's like, he heard about some big action in Midtown with Madame Mask, with no mention of Venom. And when he sees Robbie leaving, he's like, huh? Who's this dork? You guys opening up the relationship or what? And it's like, man, Dylan, you wildin'. So MJ's just like, Robbie's an old friend, as Venom makes his way back into MJ. And Robbie doesn't even respond to what Dylan said. He's basically like, yeah, I'm the old friend who was just leaving. And as Robbie's leaving, Paul pulls Dylan to the side and he's like, hey, not cool, man, not cool. Nah. But Paul tells Dylan here, there's no need at all for that kind of talk. It's crass and you're better than that. And for the record, I don't think I could stay in a relationship with 3 people in it, even if the other 2 were open and honest. And after that, he goes to get dinner started. But you can tell that he said it loud enough so MJ and Venom could hear, because clearly he's talking about them. And for Dylan, it just comes off as a weird response coming from Paul, though on the other hand, MJ, she knows exactly what Paul's talking about. And just after this, MJ gets a call from Flash Thompson. So she tells Dylan to go help Paul in the kitchen, but Dylan's like, is it anybody I know? So MJ just tells him it's an old college buddy, which is a very vague answer. But with Flash calling, he tells her, listen, Scar just put some extra conditions on the agreement we made about Dylan. And according to some information I just gathered, that might create a problem for us. So right there, MJ's like, crap, do we need to meet somewhere and talk? And Flash is just like, not talk. No, I think we need to fight. In other words, catch me outside. How about that? Because Flash Thompson's just outside the window and he knows that MJ is the all-new Venom. And what he's referring to as far as the whole situation with Scar and their extra conditions, this goes back to what we saw in issue 4, when we saw Flash getting grilled for being anti-Venom, but not being anti-all-new Venom. Because at the time we saw Ripcord tell Flash, if he doesn't bring in all-new Venom, then Scar's going after Dylan. So fast forward to now with Flash overhearing these new details and discovering that MJ is actually all-new Venom, the 2 of these guys either got to plan out a fight and make it convincing to buy Flash some time, or most likely have Flash bring all-new Venom in, which would also be staged, but they really don't have too many options as far as figuring out how to keep Scar away from Dylan. So yeah, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to drop a like and let me know in the comments, what do you think's the best plan moving forward that won't kick off Venom War Part 2, because they've got to do something about Scar. And so now real quick, I want to give a special shout out to all the patrons. Thank you guys for all of your support. And for anyone who's new here, who wants more information on how to support the channel, I got a link below where you can go to patreon.com/dopespill. But that'll do it for this one, guys. Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below, and we'll do it again on the next one. Alright, later.